Thank you so much for watching, listening. I have a cool guest to introduce to you, and I'm really excited also to get to know her myself. My guest is Dr. Amanda Porter. Thank you so much for hanging out.
Thank you for having me.
Totally stoked. And I always jump into these questions like before the interview, before they run the cameras, and then everybody tells me, stop asking, wait for the cameras. So I have a boatload of questions I want to ask, right? I'm excited. So one, I know you wrote 2 books. Revolving around anxiety.
Yes.
We talked a little bit offset. Why were you excited to write around this topic, anxiety?
Yes, great question. I think it's such a personal thing for me. So I have been struggling myself with an anxiety disorder for the past probably 15 years or so. It's part of the reason I wanted to go into the mental health field. And then I feel like there's this very kind of tense intersection between faith and mental health. And I really wanted to speak to that. So that's kind of been my work over the past 10 years.
And it seems like we tend to do one side, we lean like a seesaw, right? A seesaw, sure. We tend to do all faith or we tend to do all mental health. And so how do you navigate that?
Well, it's always a balance, and it's always a combination of a lot of different treatment approaches. So what I tell my patients is there's no one size fits all. It's all very customized to the individual. Some people do find a lot of value in relying mostly on their faith. They really dive into scripture. They immerse themselves in whatever their religious practices are, and they feel a lot of peace through those methods. But for other people, they need a little bit of science sprinkled in there too. So maybe they go to see a therapist, maybe they're on a medication. So again, it's very different depending on the person.
And in your own journey with anxiety, and this is gonna sound really stupid, so don't be offended.
No stupid questions.
Maybe. So how do you define anxiety?
Oh, no, that's a great question, because that can mean different things for different people, right?
Yeah.
So I would define anxiety as the feeling of fear, worry, dread, kind of this sense of impending doom, sense of a lack of control. A lot of people feel that, like they have no control over their lives, and that makes them very anxious. And then, when a person struggles to a certain degree to where they're very debilitated or incapacitated with their anxiety, then things kind of cross the line and we start to think about this person having a diagnosable condition.
Interesting. Are there things that contribute to anxiety? What kind of things?
Yes. Oh my gosh, so many things, right? So, there's perhaps a genetic predisposition to having an anxiety disorder. If you've experienced some sort of traumatic event, you're more prone to be anxious chronically. And I think self-care has a lot to do with it as well. So for someone who perhaps is leaning on substances or chemicals a little bit too much, or perhaps they're not setting good boundaries or limits with their time or their relationships, those types of things can absolutely increase anxiety for a person.
And what if you grew up in a home where you had parents who were kind of anxious?
Sure.
Because I would think that a person could think that's normal.
Exactly. When it's actually not. But definitely, if you have parents who were anxious themselves and didn't model good, healthy ways of coping, then you're more likely to enter your adult years in this kind of frantic state of anxiety.
And is it contagious?
Contagious.
That's an interesting question, huh?
Contagious, meaning like if I brush up against you, I'm going to infect you with anxiety.
Maybe. Or in the room, right?
Yeah. That's interesting. I think that as humans, we're kind of all interconnected. And if someone is feeling anxious, another person can pick up on it. I don't know. Let me think about that, actually.
I know. And the reason I asked that in part is because, I travel a fair amount. And recently I was on a plane, and the lady in front of me, it was a long plane ride, right? It was over 6 hours. And the lady in front of me, just Jack in the Box, Johnny jump up, Janet jump up. I don't know how many times she's up. And, and so my point in asking the question, anxiety, is it contagious? If I kept watching her, I'd be like,
Yes.
Or you listen, sometimes you hear conversations of somebody in a line and they're like, I'm worried about it. And you're like, oh, I never thought of that,
Sure.
I remember with COVID, everybody's like, ooh, don't get COVID. I'm like, it's bad, but let's think about Ebola. Like that's a little bit different animal. That makes me anxious. Ebola does. So anyways, I just think it's interesting that people, we have an effect. We can have an effect on each other. Maybe the same way with peace.
Yes. Actually, the longer that we talk about this, I'm remembering that there's this concept of mirror neurons. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but we are actually in a very cool way, designed by God to pick up on the emotions of the people around us through our mirror neuron system. So the neurons in my brain are kind of picking up on what's going on in the neurons in your brain. And I think this is a way that God has designed us and created us to be empathetic towards one another, right? To pick up on things, ways that people are struggling so that we can intervene and help if possible.
We have mirror neurons.
Mirror neurons.
It's a scientific thing.
It's a thing.
It's not like Star
Science. No. Although I've never really gotten into that, so.
That's totally fine. Totally good. So you wrote, but then I think you also like to read.
Of course.
Be accurate?
Absolutely.
What do you like to read?
Yes. Ooh, I'm actually a really picky reader.
Yeah.
So for example, on the plane right here, I started to read a really great book called The Anatomy of Anxiety. By Dr. Ellen, I can't remember her last name, but she's kind of a holistic psychiatrist.
Yeah.
So trying not to just like throw Prozac at everybody who comes in her office with anxiety, but really trying to understand what the true root is of their struggle and addressing that issue. So maybe it's a lack of self-care, maybe it's poor nutrition. There are a lot of different things that can be tackled rather than just kind of covering somebody with a chemical, like an antidepressant. Now, those have their time and place, don't get me wrong. I take medication myself, but they're not the answer for everything or everybody.
Right. So in terms of reading, that's one. And you say you're very, very selective. So what's stuff that you're like, I don't read that?
I have a rule, okay, because I feel like I get stressed out thinking about all the good books in the world that I don't have a chance to read. So my rule is, I read the first chapter of a book, and if I'm not totally into it, I put it aside and I move on to the next one. So I feel like I have a good balance of fiction and nonfiction.
So you ditched a lot of books.
Oh yeah.
No time. Yeah, I get that.
Yep.
Life's too short for
Life's too
a bad
short.
book.
There's too many good shows, there's too many good podcasts, there's too many good books. Yeah.
So balance fiction, nonfiction. What do you like for fiction?
What have I read recently? I do like, you know what? Maybe I haven't read a lot of fiction lately. I'm having trouble coming up with a name. All the Light We Cannot See. That's one of my favorites. I really like a lot of Jodi Picoult's books.
Yep.
19 Minutes is one of my favorites of hers. Do you like her?
I've never read her.
Okay.
Obviously, I know who she is, right? I mean, she's really, really famous.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Did you ever read, I'm not going to get the name right, the author right, Glass Castle?
Jeanette something or other?
Willis, something like that. It's a W.
I didn't get into that one.
No.
But I read it several years ago, so maybe I should give it another chance.
Yep.
Yeah.
My daughter recommended it to me, and I read it. I'm the slowest reader you will ever meet.
Okay.
Like,
you should try audiobooks.
I've tried.
On double speed. You get there faster.
Yeah. But I picked it up, and that one I loved. I loved Glass Castle because of just the journey of the little girl.
Sure. So you like memoirs?
No. Well, I don't know. I mean, that was interesting. I didn't know it was a memoir, and then after I read it, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So, but I loved All the Light We Cannot See. That was fantastic.
Yes. Yes. Have you read Prince Harry's book? It's really good. Oh, it's really good.
Nice. Did you read Poisonwood Bible?
No. That's on my list, though.
Holy
Barbara
buckets.
Kingsolver, right? That's on my list. I have
She's
a very long to read
the bomb
list.
diggity. She wrote a Pulitzer, Demon Copperhead.
That won a Pulitzer?
Oh,
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Like
she's
full on.
really good.
She is. She's an amazing author. When I grow up, I want to be like, no, I don't. All right. So, in terms of self-care, what are things you do to look after yourself?
Oh, sure. I mean, very, very basic stuff that I think a lot of us don't give enough time or attention to. So, feeding yourself well, hydrating, getting enough sleep, right? Exercise. Those are very basic self-care things. And then we have next tier self-care things like mindfulness, spirituality practices, meditation, deep breathing, going to see a therapist.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to see a therapist, I think. Yeah, everyone needs to at least once in their lives.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yep.
Very cool. And last question, what kind of hobbies do you have?
Ooh, hobbies. Who has time for that? I'm not an artsy type. You know, I've tried like knitting and crocheting and needlework, and I'm not good at creative things. I'm also not very athletic. So it's really boring, but probably my hobby is sitting on the couch and reading a book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's fantastic. Totally get that.
Yep.
And sit down and just relax.
Sure.
What part of the country are you from?
Ohio.
Oh.
Cincinnati area.
Yep.
Yep.
It's kind of like cloudy there in the winter.
Oh, it's awful. If you're a depressed person, it's an awful place to live.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I have a lot of patients who will just fly to Florida for the winter.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just get out of town because it does wonders for their mental health.
Vitamin D, sunshine.
Yep. Sunshine,
mental
warm
health.
weather. Yep. Yep.
I get that. I was there. I think I was somewhere maybe it was Indiana. And I remember I was there, it was like November. And the person who collected me from the airport, she's like, I said, yeah, it's kind of cloudy, rainy. She's like, oh, it's like this for the next 4 to 6 months. And I'm like, ugh.
Yep.
Oof. So were you born and raised there?
No, I was born in Kentucky. I lived a lot of places. Moved to Virginia when I was 4, stayed there through high school, and then went to South Carolina for my undergrad, and then moved to Ohio for grad school.
That's kind of fun.
Yep.
All super urban or a mix of urban and rural?
Mix.
Yeah. And what's your favorite place you've lived among all of those places?
Oh, probably South Carolina, because it's so green, it's so warm. Lots of good opportunities for being outdoors.
Great food.
Great food.
Holy buckets.
Cajun food is my favorite. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you. Here's a question for you to think about. And of course, I don't think I said this. You need to subscribe to this channel. Sorry, I missed that at the beginning. But if you didn't already, subscribe now. Hit the notification bell right there. We'll keep you posted on when we put up new content. And here's a question for you to think of. In the wintertime, what do you do to protect your mental health? That's a really good question. Just put that in the, I have friends that are like playing basketball, it's fun. I see everybody behind the cameras, but you don't get to see them, but I do. Great ideas. Anyways, thank you so much. And here's your joke, right? We have to finish with a joke. What do you call an old snowman? This one's really good. Water. All right. Thanks for watching and listening.